This is Mrs. Wainwright's math class, chapters 6, 7, and 8, Packet E, review sheet solutions for the test review. This is going to go over the solutions for numbers 16 through 20 on the review sheet. Let's take a look at question number 16. Each student in a class plays one of three sports: soccer, volleyball, or basketball. So I'm picturing a class of students. Every student plays a sport. They play only one sport, they don't play more than one. And the sport choices that they play are either soccer, volleyball, or basketball. Okay, let's take a look at the first bullet. 3/5 of the number of students play soccer. Second bullet, 1/4 of the number of students play volleyball. The question says, what fraction of the number of students play basketball? And I see that my answer is all fractions. So again, let me go back and see what I know. I know that there's a class. Well, how many classes are there? If it just says a class, that's actually one class, and that's going to be one whole class. What else do I know? Each student plays one of three different sports. I have soccer, which is sport 1, volleyball, which is sport 2, and basketball, which is sport 3. I numbered them myself. Okay, again, in my first bullet, it tells me how many people play soccer, and I said up top that that is sport number 1. My second bullet says 1/4 of the number of students play volleyball, and if I look up top, I said that volleyball is sport number 2. The question wants to know what number of the students play basketball, and I said that basketball, if I look up top, is sport number 3. So what do I know here? I know how many kids play soccer and how many kids play volleyball. I just don't know how many kids play basketball. So let's do step A and figure out how many kids I know that play soccer and volleyball. Step A is what I know, and I know that 3/5 play soccer, because it shows it right over there by the first bullet, and I know that 1/4 play volleyball, because it shows it right over there by the second bullet. So if I add together both of those two, I'll know how many kids play two of the sports. So I'm going to turn this into an addition problem to find the total for the two sports that I know. Now, to add or subtract fractions, I must have common denominators, so let's take a look at my denominators in this problem. 3/5 the denominator is 5, and 1/4 the denominator is 4, and those are not common. Therefore, I'm going to need to find the LCD to find out what my common denominator is. Fastest way to find the LCD is to put your largest number first, so I'll put my 5, and then my 4. Go through my 5 times tables. 5 times 1 is 5. When I go through my 4s, do I say 5? 4, 8, nope. After 5 comes 10. When I go through my 4s, do I say 10, 4, 8, 12? No, I don't. After 10 comes 15. When I go through my 4s, do I say 15? No, I don't. Next comes 20. When I go through my 4s, do I say 20? Yes, I do. So my least common denominator is 20. I'm going to set up new fractions and put that LCD as my bottom common denominator. I'm going to use my window boxes to get myself set up. And let's look at 3/5. What do I do to a 5 to turn it into 20? Well, 5 times 4 equals 20. Whatever I do on the bottom of the window box, I must do on the top of the window box. So I'll put my times 4 there. Solve it. 3 times 4 equals 12. So 3/5 turned into 12/20. Okay, let's take a look at my bottom fraction. What do I do to a 4 to turn it into 20? Well, 4 times 5 equals 20. Whatever I do on the bottom, I must do on the top. So I'll say times 5 again, and I'll solve. 1 times 5 is 5. So 1/4 turned into 5/20. So let's add. My numerator is 12 plus 5 equals 17. My denominator will stay as 20. Now again, I don't try and simplify my fractions until I'm done with the entire problem. So what do I know here? I know that 17/20 of the class plays soccer or volleyball because I added together the soccer and volleyball fractions. Let's take a look at what I need to do next. Well, when I look back at the problem, they told me the fraction of kids that played soccer and the fraction that played volleyball. I added them together and I got the total. But the question still says, what fraction of the number of students play basketball? So I don't know how many kids play basketball. How can I figure that out? Well, if I take the total, which is one whole class, and I subtract the number of kids I know, which is the number of kids that play soccer or volleyball, what I will have left is how many kids play basketball. So I'm going to set myself up for step B, which is my total, or my one whole class, minus the soccer or volleyball kids, which will equal whatever kids are left in the class, and I know that those are the basketball kids. And again, as we learned with fractions, if it's a whole of something, it's 1. So my whole class is 1 minus the soccer and volleyball kids, which I figured out was 17/20. So it's going to be 1 minus 17/20. I've run out of room, so I'm going to move to the next page to finish this up. So I have 1 for my one whole class minus 17/20. So remember, 17/20 is a fraction. It needs to go in its own fraction column. So I'm getting ready to go ahead and subtract. And if I have one whole Hershey bar, can I give you 17 little pieces of a Hershey bar? No, because my whole Hershey bar is wrapped up. I would need to take that whole Hershey bar, open it, and break it into little pieces. So I'm going to borrow. I take the whole Hershey bar away. If I take one away, I have 0 whole Hershey bars left. The one that I took away, I picture myself opening the wrapper, and I'm going to break it up into little pieces. What size pieces should I break it into for this problem? Well, remember, in order to subtract fractions, I need to have common denominators. And if I already have a denominator of 20, and I can break my chocolate bar into any amount of pieces I want to, I'm going to break it into 20 equal pieces, which means I will still have all of them, which is 20/20. Now I have little pieces that I can give away so I can subtract. So I have 20/20 minus 17/20. Well, denominator must be the same because it's going to stay the same, so that will stay as 20. And my numerator is 20 minus 17. I can always count up, right? Take my hand to my arm and say 17. And now start with my fingers, 18, 19, and 20. And that's going to give me 3. This will be my final answer. Remember, anytime I have a final answer with a fraction in it, I need to ask myself 2 questions. First question is it a proper fraction? Will it work in a chicken fight? 3/20? Sure, that will work in a chicken fight, so that's a proper fraction. Perfect. Question number 2, is it fully simplified? Well, I don't see a 1. They're not in counting order, so I don't know if I'm done. 3 and 20. It's tough to say. They're not both even. I could be done. I'm not sure. So I'm going to find the GCF of both 3 and 20. Factors of 3 are 1, and its partner is 3. Does 2 work? Nope. Does 3 work? Yep, I'm done. So does 3 go into 20 evenly? 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, 18, 21. No, it doesn't. So therefore my GCF is 1, and when my GCF is 1, my fraction is done. So the answer to question number 2 is yes, 3/20 is fully simplified. Let's go back and put that into my original problem. Again, this is a multiple choice question, and the question was what fraction of the number of students plays basketball, and I see letter A right there is what I found, which is 3/20. So my final answer is letter A. Let's move on to number 17. Number 17 says Andy has a collection of movie DVDs. In Andy's collection, 3/5 of the DVDs are action, and 1/4 of the DVDs are comedy. Andy said that 4/9 of his collection is action or comedy. Cynthia said that Andy made an error. Explain whether Andy is correct or incorrect and why. And then it has some lines to do that. And then it says, what fraction of the DVDs in Andy's collection is not action or comedy? I feel like this is kind of similar to problem number 16, right? It gives me 2 fractions for 2 different things. There's a third grouping, right? One grouping is action, one grouping is comedy. The third grouping is anything that's not action or comedy. I think I can do it the same way. So let's take a look. Andy said that 4/9 of his collection is action or comedy. So if I put together the action and the comedy, I'll know how many of the DVDs are action or comedy. Put together, I know means addition. What am I going to put together? My action, which is 3/5 of the collection, and my comedy, which is 1/4 of the collection. Not much room here, so I'm going to move to the next page to solve the 3/5 plus 1/4. And as always, I'll write my problem vertically. So 3/5 plus 1/4. In order to add fractions, I need to have common denominators. What are my denominators here? One denominator is 5, the other denominator is 4. They're not common, so we'll need to find the LCD of both 5 and 4. Fastest way to do it is find the largest number first. Go through my 5 times tables. When I go through my 4s, do I say 5? No. After 5 comes 10. When I go through my 4s, do I say 10? 4, 8, 12. Nope. Next comes 15. When I go through my 4s, do I say 15? 4, 8, 12, 16. No, I do not. 5, 10, 15. Next comes 20. When I go through my 4s, do I say 20? 4, 8, 12, 16, 20. Yes, I do. So my LCD is going to be 20. Set up my new fractions with my LCD of 20. Let's put the window boxes in to set myself up, and then we're going to go ahead and figure this out. Focus in on my fraction on the top 3/5. What do I do to a 5 to turn it into 20? Well, 5 times 4 equals 20. Whatever I put on the bottom, I must put on the top. So 3 times 4 equals 12. I turn 3/5 into 12/20. Let's take a look at my bottom fraction of 1/4. What do I do to a 4 to turn it into 20? Well, 4 times 5 equals 20. Whatever I do on the bottom, I must do on the top. So 1 times 5 equals 5. Now I can add these together. So 12/20 plus 5/20. Put my fraction bar, denominators were the same because they're going to stay the same, so that's a 20. Add my numerators, and 12 plus 5 equals 17. So 17/20 of the movie collection are action or comedy. Now Andy said that 4/9 of the movie collection is action or comedy. Well, maybe he simplified, so let's try simplifying to see whether or not he's correct. I'm going to find the GCF of both 17 and 20. Let's go through 17. Factors of 17 are 1 and itself, which is 17. What about 2? Is 17 divisible by 2? Well, no, it doesn't end in an even number, so 2 doesn't work. What about 3? Let's add my numbers together. 1 plus 7 equals 8. Does 3 go into 8? Nope, not divisible by 3. What about 4? 4, 8, 12, 16, 20. 4 doesn't work. 5 doesn't end in a 0 or a 5. 6, it's not divisible by 2 or 3, so nope. 7, 7, 14, 21 doesn't work. 8, 8, 16, 24, nope. 9, 9, 18, nope. 10 doesn't end in a 0. 11, 12. By the time you get to 12, if the only other lower number you have is 1, you can pretty much assure yourself that there are no other factors. So the only factors are 1 and 17. Well, is 17 a factor of 20? Does 17 go into 20? No, it does not. So my GCF is 1, and if my GCF is 1, my fraction is done. Therefore, 17/20 is already fully simplified. So it said to explain whether Andy is correct or incorrect and why, and if he said 4/9 of his collection is action or comedy, we know that it was 17/20, I'm going to say Andy is not correct. Now, the next part of this question says, and why? I need to figure out why Andy is not correct. Let me go back to the work and see if I can figure out what he did wrong. Well, I know that Andy said that 4/9 of the collection was action or comedy. Where could he have gotten 4/9 from? First, let me look at the original part of the problem, which was 3/5 plus 1/4. I think I see it. If Andy added 3 plus 1 without making common denominators, that would have been 4, which was the numerator he had. And if he added 5 plus 4, thinking that you can add denominators, that would have been 9, which was the denominator that he had. So I think Andy's mistake is he doesn't know how to add fractions. He simply added the numerator or denominator. And we all know that's not the correct way to add fractions. So why was Andy's answer incorrect? Because he did not find common denominators before adding. But I'm not done yet because there's another sentence under there or another question, and it says, what fraction of the DVDs in Andy's collection is not action or comedy? I want to know what fraction are not action or comedy. Well, how am I going to figure that out? Well, I know how much is action and comedy. That's 17/20. So, if I take the action and comedy portion away from his collection, whatever is left will be my total. Well, what's his collection? one whole collection. So if I take that one whole collection minus the 17/20ths that I already figured out is the action and comedy, I'll know how much is left that's not action or comedy. Let's move to the next page to figure that portion out. So again, 17/20ths was the part of his collection that was action and comedy together. And his whole collection is one whole collection. So I'm going to do 1 minus the action and comedy, or 1 minus the 17/20ths that I just figured out. So I'll write my numbers vertically, 1 minus 17/20ths. I'm ready to subtract, but I don't have any little pieces to take away. So I have to take one of the whole Hershey bars away. If I take one away, I'll have 0 whole Hershey bars left. The one that I took away is a whole bar in a wrapper. Open up the wrapper. How many pieces should I break it into? Well, my denominator is 20, so I'm going to break it into 20/20ths. Let's go ahead and subtract. Denominator stays the same, so that's 20. 20 minus 17, again, hand to arm, 17, now with fingers, 18, 19, 20, 3 fingers up, so my numerator is a 3. So 3/20ths of his collection is not action or comedy. This is going to be my final answer. When I have a final answer with a fraction, I have to ask myself 2 questions. Question number 1, is it a proper fraction, meaning will it work in a chicken fight? Well, yes, 3/20ths will work in a chicken fight, so yes, it is a proper fraction. Question number 2, is it fully simplified? And I'm not so sure about that, so I'm going to find my GCF of 3 and 20. Factors of 3 are 1 and 3. 2 does not work, so that's it. Does 3 go evenly into 20? No, it does not. So my GCF is 1. When my GCF is 1, my fraction is done. So 3/20ths, let's go back and put that into my final answer. So the last part of this question was what fraction of the DVDs is not action or comedy? So I'm going to say 3/20ths of the DVDs are not action and comedy. And that's my final answer. So really I have 3 parts to this final answer, right? The first one is on the lines, Andy is not correct. The second part, why is he not correct? Because he did not find common denominators before adding. And then the third part is 3/20ths of the DVDs are not action or comedy. If I had this question and I left any one of those 3 out, the question would be considered wrong. All 3 parts need to be there. Part number 1, part number 2, and part number 3 to be considered a correct answer. In addition, I needed to show my work for it to be considered a correct answer. Remember, anytime it says show work, you can't even do 1 plus 1 in your head. Every step needs to be written down or you do not get the credit for it. Okay, go back and check everything for number 17, and then we'll move on to 18. Let's take a look at a question number 18. Rodney bought a 25-pound bag of dog food. So I'm picturing one of those big, heavy bags of dog food. His dog ate, whole numbers, 10 pounds of the food in the first month and 10 pounds of the food in the second month. How much dog food in pounds was remaining in the bag at the end of the month? Well, again, let's see what the question is asking. How much food in pounds is remaining in the bag at the end of the 2 months? I noticed something, so I'm going to take care of it right now. It wants to know how much food in pounds. I know my unit needs to be pounds, so while I'm thinking about it, let me fill that unit in. What else do I know? I know that Rodney bought a 25-pound bag of dog food. I know that the dog ate 10 pounds, again going with whole numbers, in the first month. And he ate another 10 pounds in the second month. And then I'll need to figure out how much was remaining in the bag. So let's see. 25-pound bag of dog food, that's my total. That's the total amount of dog food that he started with. And if I want to know my question in red, how much dog food is remaining in the bag, when I want to know how much of something is remaining, it's like saying how much is left. And how much is left in the bag is a subtraction problem. So how much remaining in the bag is the same thing as how much is left in the bag. But if it's a subtraction problem, what am I subtracting from what? Well, I can take my total, which is 25 pounds, and I can subtract what his dog ate in the first month, which is 10 2/5 pounds. Remember, I turn it back to the actual number when I'm writing the problems. So I can go ahead and solve this problem. 25 minus 10 2/5. Well, if I have no little pieces, can I give little pieces away? No, I can't, so I'm going to have to borrow. Cross out the 25. If I take one away, I will now have 24 whole Hershey bars. That one Hershey bar that I took away, I can picture myself opening the wrapper and breaking it into little pieces. How many little pieces should I break it into? Well, 5, because my denominator of 2/5 was 5. I have all of them, so I have 5/5. Now I can go ahead and subtract 5/5 minus 2/5. 5 minus 2 is 3. Denominator stays the same, so that's 3/5. And 24 minus 10. Well, 4 minus 0 is 4, and 2 minus 1 is 1. So I know after the first month, there were 14 3/5 pounds of dog food left. But I also know Rodney's dog ate more dog food in the second month, so I'm going to do step B. I'll take that 14 3/5 pounds that's left after the first month, start with that, and then I'll subtract what he ate in the second month, and the actual amount he ate was 10 4/5. I can subtract this and know how much was left after the 2 months. Okay, let's take a look at our fractions. 3/5 minus 4/5. In order to add or subtract fractions, I must have common denominators. Do I? Well, yes, they're both 5. That's perfect. Okay, so if I have 3 little pieces, can I give you 4 little pieces? No, I can't because I don't have enough. So I'm going to have to borrow. Cross out the 14. If I take one away, that turns into 13. Take that Hershey bar, open up the wrapper, break it into little pieces. My denominator tells me that I should break it into 5 little pieces. I have all of them, so I will have my number plus the 5/5, or the 5 little pieces that I'm going to break it into. Let's rework this number. So my whole number is 13. And my fraction would be the 3/5 that I had originally plus the 5/5 from the bar that I broke up. 3/5 plus 5/5 equals 8/5. And move my 10 4/5 over as well. Put my subtraction sign in my equal bar, and I can go ahead and subtract. 8/5 minus 4/5, well, denominator stays the same, and 8 minus 4 equals 4, so that's going to be 4/5. 3 minus 0 equals 3. 1 minus 1 equals 0. So I know that after the first month there was 14 3/5 pounds of food, and then after the second month there were 3 4/5 pounds of food. That's my final answer. Now, my final answer has a fraction. When my final answer has a fraction, I have to ask myself 2 questions. Question number 1, is it a proper fraction? Will it work in a chicken fight? 4/5, yep, that will work in a chicken fight, so that's a proper fraction. Number 2, is it fully simplified? And 4, 5 is in counting order, so yes, it's fully simplified. So my final fully simplified answer is 3 4/5 pounds. And that's the answer to question 18. Again, notice for question 18 that it did say show work, so you would need to show all steps of the work to get full credit. And again, that includes something as small and little as 1 plus 1. And I want to remind you, for multi-step problems, there's very often more than one way to solve it. Another way that I could have solved it is put the first 2 months together, 10 2/5 pounds plus 10 4/5 pounds. That would have given me 20 6/5 pounds for the first 2 months. And that was step A. Remember, I don't simplify till the very end of my problem. Step B, I could have said the 25-pound total minus the total for the 2 months, which is 20 6/5, and I could have gone ahead to subtract that. Well, I'd have to borrow from the 25, so I cross out the 25, make it a 24. I'm going to break my Hershey bar into 5 pieces, which would be 5/5, and I would try and subtract, but if I have 5 little pieces, I can't give you 6, so I'd have to borrow again. I'd cross out the 24 and make it a 23. I'd take that Hershey bar, break it into 5 pieces, which would be another 5/5, and I'd write my new number. So my whole number is 23. 5/5 plus the other 5/5 would be 10/5. Bring over my bottom number, minus 20 6/5, and I could go ahead and subtract. And 10/5 minus 6/5 is going to equal 4/5. 23 minus 20 is going to equal 3. So you see, either way, I get the same answer, 3 and 4/5. Doesn't matter which way you choose to solve it, as long as you get that correct answer and show all your work. Okay, let's move on to number 19. Question number 19 says, in a shipment of new books for the library, 5/12 of the book were poetry, 2/5 of the books were biographies. The remainder of the books in the shipment were mysteries. What fraction of the books in the shipment were mysteries? So again, let's go ahead and see what our questioner is asking us. It wants to know what fraction of the books in the shipment are mysteries. What do I know? I know that 5/12 of the books are poetry. I know that 2/5 of the books are biographies. And then I know that the remaining books are mysteries. So what can I figure out first? Let's put my poetry and biography books together to see what fraction of the books are both poetry and biography. And I know that the remaining books in the shipment are mysteries. The question wants to know how many of the books in the shipment are actually mysteries. So what can I do to figure this out? Kind of sounds like some of the other problems, right? I have a whole shipment of books. Remember that one whole, a whole is one whole. You'll see that a lot with fraction problems. It doesn't tell you the number, but it's telling you a full thing, which is like a whole thing, which counts as one. I know one set fraction of it, which is 5/12. I know another fraction of it, which is 2/5. I need to know what that missing fraction is. So I'm going to solve this one by doing step A and adding them together first. Again, like problem 18, I could do it either way, but here I'm going to choose to add them together first. So I'm going to say my 5/12, which is my poetry books, plus my 2/5, which are my biographies, and see what that equals all together. I'm getting ready to add my fractions, and in order to add fractions, I must have common denominators. My denominators here are 12 and 5. They are not common. So I'll need to find my LCD of both 12, because it's the largest, I'll do it first, and then 5. Go through my 12 times tables. 12. Does 5 go into 12? No. 24? No. 36? No. 48? No. 60. Ah, yes, 60 ends in a 0, so it's divisible by 5. So my LCD is 60. And that's going to be my new common denominator. Make for a fraction bar, put a 60. Make my next fraction bar, put a 60. And this is where I got them from, my LCD. Put my window boxes to set myself up. Let's look at the top fraction. 12 times what equals 60? Well, I know that 12 times 5 equals 60. Whatever I do on the bottom, I must do on the top. So 5 times 5, and I'll solve it. I get 25. So 5/12 turned into 25/60. Let's take a look at the bottom fraction, 2/5. 5 times what equals 60? Well, I know that 5 times 12 equals 60. Whatever I do on the bottom, I must do on the top. So I'm going to say times 12. 2 times 12 is 24. I add them together, and let's see what I get. 25/60 plus 24/60. Denominator stays the same. 5 plus 4 equals 9. 2 plus 2 equals 4. So I get 49/60. So 49/60 are the poetry and biographies. I know that I'm going to take that away from my one whole shipment. So part B will be one whole minus 49/60. Remember, fractions go in their own column in a subtraction or an addition problem. If I have 0 little pieces, can I give you 49? Of course not. So I'll need to borrow, cross out the 1, make it a 0, take that Hershey bar, open it up from the package. How many pieces should I break it into? That's right, 60, because my denominator is 60. So now I have 60/60. I'll go ahead and subtract. My denominator stays the same, so it's 60. 0 minus 9, I can't do it, so I'm going to cross out the 6, make it a 5. That turns into a 10. 10 minus 9 equals 1. 5 minus 4 equals 1. So I get 11/60. Now, final answers. I must ask myself 2 questions, but remember, this is a multiple choice problem. When I have a multiple choice problem, sometimes an answer is fully simplified, sometimes it is not. Sometimes it's a proper fraction, sometimes it is not. So what I do for multiple choice is before I waste my time checking those things or asking myself those two questions, I first look and see if my answer is one of the choices. The answer that I found is 11/60ths. A is 2/12ths. No, but oh, look at B. B is 11/60ths. So I know that choice B is my final answer, and I don't need to move on any further from that. Let's take a look at question number 20. Okay, fair warning, question number 20 is a doozy. It is a multi-step problem that's going to take us a while. We do want to make sure that you understand this because for the Pkt E test you will have a question that's similar to this. So if you feel like your brain is not there right now from doing question numbers 17, 18, and 19, I suggest you pause this video, set a timer, take a 15-minute break, do something fun, run around a little bit, run up some stairs, and then come back to this problem when you're ready to think about it. Okay, here goes, question number 20. The table below shows parts of the operating budget on a small dairy farm for the last year. The only expense not listed in the table is maintenance. What on earth is an operating budget? I don't know the foggiest idea. But here's what I do know. There's a table. I see the table right here. I know that it shows whatever this operating budget is for a small dairy farm. So this is a farm that produces dairy, obviously like milk or cheese, things like that. It says the only expense not listed is maintenance. Okay, so maintenance is missing. The next paragraph under the table says, this year, the managers of the farm will change the fraction of the budget for housing to 1/8, but leave the fraction of the budget for food and medical care the same. Well, I see that there's food, housing, and medical care. I know they're going to change housing. I know that food and medical care are going to stay the same. All right, keep going. Again, the remaining portion of the budget will be for maintenance expenses. The question says, what is the difference between the fraction of the budget for maintenance this year and last year? Oh my goodness. Well, remember, don't stress out. Let's break it up into step by step. First thing we always do when we have a word problem is go back to the actual question. Find your question mark, back up to the asking word. And this question says, what is the difference between the fraction of the budget for maintenance for this year and last? I still don't know what this budget for maintenance is, but here's what I do know. I know that the difference is the answer to a subtraction problem, so right there, this has to be subtraction. I know that they're comparing the budget for maintenance from this year and last year. So let's go back up into the top part of the problem and see what else I know. I know that the table shows the operating budget, whatever that is, for last year. My question wants me to compare this year and last year, but this table shows me last year. So I know at least there's information for last year. What else do I know? The only expense that's not listed is maintenance. So maintenance is not listed in this table. So you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to set myself up, even if I don't know what the number is, and I'm going to add maintenance onto this table because I know that it's missing. So I'm going to make another section for myself, food, housing, medical care, and I am going to write down maintenance, which I can copy the spelling right from above that's circled in blue. Maintenance, and I don't know what the fraction of the budget is for that, so I'll simply leave it blank. Okay, so that table is totally set up for last year. Now, underneath the table it says that this year, and I know I need to know something about this year, the managers of the farm will change the fraction of the budget for housing to 1/8. So they're going to change housing to 1/8. But they will leave food and medical the same. Remember, what's shown here in the table is last year's budget. I'm talking green about this year's budget. So let me make my own table for this year's budget, and I'll make it right next to it. I know that housing, they're changing to 1/8. So right for housing, I'll put 1/8. I know that food is going to be the same, and if food is the same, it was 1/3, so it will stay 1/3. I know that medical is going to be the same, And here's where the medical is. If it's 1/4, medical will stay 1/4. Okay, so I have that portion of this year's budget. I'm going to go ahead and put my lines in to make it look like a table. And what else do I know? I know that the remaining portion of the budget will be for maintenance again. So I have food for this year is 1/3 in green. Housing for this year is changed to 1/8 in green. Medical care for this year stays the same as 1/4. And then maintenance, I don't know what it is, but I know there has to be the remaining portion for maintenance. The final question asks, what's the difference, which again we said a subtraction, of the budget for maintenance for this year and last year? Well, if I look up into this year's table, I don't know what maintenance is for this year, so I'm going to have to figure that out. And compared to last year, and if I look up at last year's table under maintenance, I don't know what maintenance is, so I'm going to have to figure that out too. So it looks to me like the first thing I'm going to need to do is figure out the maintenance for both last year and this year, and then I can find the difference. Let's move to the next page to find the total of maintenance for last year and this year. So I moved my tables over to the next page as well and kept them small so I can look back at them. I need to figure out what maintenance is for last year first, which is the black and blue table. Black and blue, it's kind of funny, hey? So we're going to do step A, figure out for the black and blue table for last year. Think back to the other problems we've done in this lesson. It's very similar. In this case, we have a whole budget for last year. I know 3 parts, I'm missing the last part. So I can add together the 3 parts that I know, subtract it from the one whole budget to figure out what that last part is, and that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take my last year, food plus housing plus medical care. So I have my 1/3 for my food, plus my 1/3 for my housing, plus my 1/4 for my medical care. Now in order to add fractions, I need to have common denominators, and my denominators are 3, 3, and 4. They're not all common. So first I need to find my LCD of my denominators, which are 4 and 3, right? Because the first 2 ones are 3, they're exactly the same, so it's 4 and 3. When I go through my 4 times tables, I say 4. When I go through my 3's, do I say 4? 3, 6, nope. After 4 comes 8. When I go through my 3's, do I say 8? Nope. 12. When I go through my 3's, do I say 12? 3, 6, 9, 12. Yes, I do. So my least common denominator is 12. Every fraction will have a new denominator using that LCD, so every fraction will have a new denominator of 12. Put my window boxes to set myself up, and let's take a look at 1/3. What do I do to a 3 to turn it into 12? Well, 3 times 4 is 12. Whatever I do on the bottom, I must do on the top. 1 times 4 equals 4. So 1/3 turned into 4/12. Let's take a look at my next fraction. Well, I think it's exactly the same, right? 1/3 is going to turn into how many 12ths? If I didn't see that, I'd still solve 3 times what equals 12? 3 times 4 equals 12. Whatever I do in the bottom, I must do on the top, so I'll say times 4, and 1 times 4 is 4. Move down to my bottom fraction, 1/4. What do I do to a 4 to turn it into 12? Well, 4 times 3 equals 12. Whatever I do on the bottom, I must do on the top, so 1 times 3 equals 3. Now I have common denominators, and I can add them together. My denominator was made the same because it's going to stay the same, so that's 12. And let's add my numerators. 4 plus 4 is 8, plus 3 is 11. So I have 11/12, which is what all 3, food, housing, and medical care, add up to. Now in order to find maintenance, I will take my one whole budget, and I will subtract the total for the 3 that I know. My difference will be how much is left for the maintenance for this year. So I'm going to say the one whole budget minus the 11/12, which is what the other portions are. I'm getting ready to subtract, but I don't have any little pieces, so I can't give you 11. Therefore, I'm going to borrow, cross out the 1, make it a 0. Break up that Hershey bar into, well, my denominator is 12, so I'll break into 12/12. And now I could subtract. Denominators were made the same because they're going to stay the same. 12 minus 11 is 1. My denominator will be 12, and 0 minus nothing is 0. So I know that for maintenance, for last year, it is 1/12, or 0 and 1/12. But we know for a fraction, if my whole number is 0, I can just drop it. So I'm going to fill right into my chart for last year. The fraction for maintenance for last year is 1/12. Now we'll need to figure out the fraction of maintenance for this year. Let's turn to the next page to do that. So to figure out the portion of the budget for maintenance for this year, I'm going to do the same thing as I did for last year, just with this year's numbers. So for this year, I'm going to add together my food, my housing, and my medical care, which is what I know. The food is 1/3 of the budget, the housing is 1/8 of the budget, and the medical care, according to the green part for this year, is 1/4 of the budget. I'm going to go ahead and add those together, but in order to add fractions, I need to have common denominators. My denominators are 3, 8, and 4. They're not common, so I need to find the LCD. Start with my largest number first, which is 8, then my 4, and then my 3. When I go through my 8 times tables, I say 8. When I go through my 4s, do I say 8? Yes, I do. 4, 8. But when I go through my 3s, do I say 8? 3, 6, 9. No, I don't. 8's not good. After 8 comes 16. When I go through my 4s, do I say 16? Yes. When I go through my 3s, do I say 16? 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, 18. No, I don't. 16's not good. Go back to my 8s. 8, 16, 24. When I go through my 4s, do I say 24? 4, 8, 12, 16, 20, 24. Yes. When I go through my 3s, do I say 24? 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, 18, 21, 24. Yes, I do. So since it's yes to everything, my LCD is 24. This will become my new common denominator. So I'm going to put equals, a fraction bar with 24 as my denominator. Again, equals a fraction bar with 24 as my denominator. And again, equals a fraction bar with 24 as my denominator, since that's my LCD. This is where I got my denominators of 24. Set myself up with my window boxes. And 3 times what equals 24? Well, 3 times 8 equals 24. Whatever I do on the bottom, I must do on the top. 1 times 8 equals 8. So 1/3 turned into 8/24. Let's take a look at my second fraction. What do I do to an 8 to turn it into a 24? Well, 8 times 3 is 24. Whatever I do on the bottom, I must do on the top. So 1 times 3 equals 3. Bottom fraction, 1/4. What do I do with a 4 to turn it into 24? Well, 4 times 6 equals 24. Whatever I do on the bottom, I must do on the top. 1 times 6 equals 6. So let's go ahead and add these together now. 8 plus 3 is 11, and 11 plus 6 equals 17. Denominator stays the same, so I have 17/24 when I add together food, housing, and medical. So now I have to take all three and subtract it from the total budget for the year. I set myself up for part D. Okay, total budget is one whole budget for this year. So I'm going to do my one whole budget minus the total that we know for food, housing, and medical care, and that will give me the maintenance. So I'm going to say my 1 minus the 17/24 that I just found. Remember, fractions go in their own column. This is where I got that 17/24 from. If I have no little pieces, can I give you 17? No, I cannot. So I'm going to need to borrow. Cross out the 1, make it a 0. Take that Hershey bar, break it into little pieces. How many pieces should you break it in? Well, whatever your denominator is. So you're going to break it into 24/24. And now we can go ahead and subtract. I can count on from 17. Hit my hand to my arm for 17, and now with my fingers, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24. I have 7 fingers up, so my numerator will be 7. My denominator stays the same at 24. And 0 minus nothing is 0, so I have 0 and 7/24 for maintenance for this year. Remember, with a fraction, I don't need to put the whole number if it's a 0, so I'm just going to put my fraction, which is 7/24 for maintenance right in the table for this year. So now I know maintenance for last year and maintenance for this year. I can go ahead and find the difference between the two. Right, because if I look back at this original question, the final question was what's the difference between the fraction of the maintenance for this year and last year. Okay, So let's move to the next page and solve that portion. So this will be step E, the difference between last year and this year for maintenance. Okay, look back at the other page. The maintenance for last year was 1/12, and the maintenance for this year, the fraction was 7/24. I need to subtract them. When I want to subtract fractions, I need to put the largest fraction on top, but since my denominators are not the same, my denominators are 12 and 24, quite honestly, I'm not 100% sure which one is the largest fraction. So I think the first thing I'm going to do is make my fractions have common denominators. I'll need to have that to subtract anyway. So let's find the LCD of 24 first because it's largest, and 12. Go through my 24 times tables. Yeah, I don't know them, do you? But I do know 24 times 1, and 24 times 1 is 24. And I can figure it out by keep adding 24s as I go. But let's see, when I go through my 12s, do I say 24? 12, 24. Yes, I do. So my least common denominator is 24. So I'm going to change my 1/12 into something 24ths. Put my window box. What do I do to 12 to turn it into 24? I say 12 times 2 equals 24. Whatever I do on the bottom, I must do on the top. So 1 times 2 equals 2. So I turned 1/12 into 2/24. I decided I'm going to cross it out up top and write 2/24. Now if I want to find the difference, I know which number has to go on top. What's larger, 2/24 or 7/24? Well, definitely 7/24. So I'm going to say 7/24 minus 2/24. In order to add or subtract fractions, I must have common denominators, and I do. So I'll make my new fraction bar with 24. I'll subtract my numerators. 7 take away 2 equals 5. So I have 5/24. This is going to be my final answer. It's the difference between last year's budget for maintenance and this year's budget for maintenance. And it's a fraction. When my final answer has a fraction, I have to ask myself 2 questions. First question, is it a proper fraction? Will it work in a chicken fight? Is it and will it? Yes, 5/24 definitely will work in a chicken fight, so that is a proper fraction. Question number 2, is it fully simplified? I don't see a 1, I don't see counting order, so I'm not really sure. So let's find the GCF and check it out. Greatest common factor of both my numerator, which is 5, and my denominator, which is 24. Factors of 5 are 1 and 5. Does 2 work? Nope. 3 doesn't go into 5. Nope. 4 doesn't go into 5. 5, oh, I'm there. So my factors of 5 are 1 and 5. When I go through my 5s, do I say 24? 5, 10, 15, 20, 25? No, I don't. So my GCF is 1. When my GCF is 1, my fraction is done. So my final, fully simplified answer is 5/24. Let's go back and put that into the original problem. What's the difference between the fraction of the budget for maintenance for this year and last year? So the difference is 5/24 of the budget. And that's my final answer. Notice in this problem, again, it says show work. So you did need to show all parts of all steps of your work. Anytime show work is said, you're graded on that. It actually counts as most of the points for the answer, so you would even need to show a 1 + 1 to get credit for your work. So now that we finished the problem, to learn from this, at the beginning of the problem I said, what the heck is an operating budget? Because I wanted to show you that even if you don't know what an operating budget is, you can still solve this problem. But I do want to let you know that a budget is the plan of how you'll spend your money. So the operating budget is the plan of how a business will spend its money to operate or to keep the business running. Okay, so that's your review sheet up to number 20. Good luck studying and good luck on this Pkt E test.